Today we're going to quickly talk about some of the support we have for assigning digital content within using ICRT. We allow you to sign the content using some XQuery functions. We have two categories of functions. One is symmetric, so that means we're using a shared password, a shared key, and for this case we're using HMAC. Within HMAC itself, we can use different digests and algorithms as well. For asymmetric methods, we actually support using keys in certain formats. One is the P8, another one is the P12, and then if you have private keys in a Java key store, you can use that as well. One of the things that we don't have right now is that you can sign the content, but if somebody sent you some signed content, we don't have any functions or utilities for you to verify. So we don't have the inverse of these of the digital signatures. So it's hard for you to verify any data that came through that is signed by somebody else. So that's TBD right now. The other thing is all the hashing and signature-related functions, they operate on string-based content. So what that means is that if you have any message, any payload, username, password, those kind of things, they actually work well for those use cases. But on the other hand, let's say you're trying to create an attachment or trying to stream an attachment, which is a binary content, we don't have a way to create a signature or hash for that yet. Okay. So the current focus is actually geared towards enabling people to create service connectors where some of the connectors require you to use signed headers as part of the payload. All the digital signature functions where you can create HMAC, sign with certificates or key files, they're available in the process designer, IPDs, as well as in the service connector. In my example, so if I show any, it will be using a util prefix for the function name, and that's because it's used in the IPDs. For service connectors, for now, the final you'll see it in the final document. We use the FM prefix, but that may change with some backwards compatibility. The other way of signing content is using the asymmetric keys. So in this case, you can use a private key. Right? The early we use a shared key, which is your password. So Amazon obviously had your password. I have my password. I can sign it. And same thing with Twitter or anything else that requires HMAC. So it's a shared password. In this case, we're using keys. So I'll sign it with my private key, and the other part will have my public key to verify it. Right now, we support the BigQuery 8, 12, and the Java key, the JKS key stores. One of the things to remember is that since these are your private keys, the keys has to be kept on your agent, right? So you may create your key, the certificate, and then store it in your agent, in your secure agent somewhere. And because of that, the IPD or the service connector that is utilizing this needs to be running on that agent, so it has access to the key file. Otherwise, it won't be able to find it. You'll see in the example that we need to specify where you can find the key store. And for example, it could be like C:/search my key store file or something. The service connector or the IPD that needs access to this should have access path as well. So therefore, you're going to make sure it's running on the same agent. On the next release, we are going to make it so that you can supply a P8 file that is base64 encoded. It's a text file, basically. So we can supply that inline. Maybe it's in text area, for example. That's one way. The other way is that if you have any key file, and if you're using the process develop, for example, you should be able to upload that to the cloud, to your contribution, and then instead of providing an agent-specific path, you can provide a contribution location. So that way, you can upload it to into your tenant. Then all agents and all processes and service connectors can use it, and they don't need to be running on a secure agent. So there were two one of the file formats. We actually use the PKS 8, 12, and the Java key store. The PKS 8 file, typically you can supply the binary file itself, that is the key file, or you can supply the base64 encoded file. Right? So signature is going to say sign with. Right now I'm just saying util : in service connector it's going to be function : But you'll see that in the documentation. So sign with key file, and this is your content to be signed. This has to be the path to the key file on your secure agent, right? So C:/something, for example. The algorithm you want to use, RSA is the default. You can use AES-DS. The algorithm you want, so digesting, SHA-1, 256. There are some additional ones I have not shown you. For example, you want a base64 encoder, hex, hex64, etc. So there's some additional options there in the documentation. The key file can be a binary standard key file, or it can be in this format, which is it's a text file that has base64 encoder content, and it starts with like begin private key and end private key.
So is it handled automatically? You don't have to.
For example, it should be handled. Definitely should be handled automatically. If not, yeah. So in this case, let me just open this guy up, right? So So here I have a private key file, right? And like I said, if you're comfortable, if you want to use certain things in 1510, we can supply this as a payload or read it from a catalog or something if you needed to. You don't have to have it on the agent. Okay. And a P12 will look like, here's my P12, it's a standard one, and most P12s are locked in as a private key. So this is the one that is password protected. And Google actually, they give you both formats. You can get the JSON or the P12 format, and the JSON actually has I had extracted out of the JSON. So JSON actually is just a JSON payload format that has multiple attributes. And in this specific case, I was interested in the contents of this guy here. So I had to take this one out and then actually manually break the line so that she'll be in the right format. P12 and keystore files, the function is called sign with certificate. And again, you have your content. Your path to your certificate file, again, has to be on the agent where the process or the connector is running on. And you can also provide a password. For example, in this case, I couldn't open it without a password. So, you provide the password. If you don't have it, you can leave it empty. Again, I haven't documented the optional ones here. So you can say, oh, if the keystore itself has a password, and just like Java keystore files, there are passwords, you can provide it, and then if your key entry has the alias, those who are familiar with JKS files, you provide the alias, and you provide the keystore type. The default is a P12, but if you're using a standard Java keystore, you just say JKS. So you may have a Java keystore file with lots of certificates or keys in there, and if that's the case, you provide the store password as well as the alias into that, so let me take you through a quick example of creating the Google JSON Web Token authentication, and I'm using this for service account. So the service account means it's running on behalf of. It's not running on a user account, so it's good for if you're trying to do lots of moving data back and forth or making API calls. But these are more for backend operations, so you can use service accounts for that. The general steps for doing that, and I'm just going to walk you through this, even though the signing part is actually a small part of it. I'm just going to walk you through the steps that needed to create a JWT here. First thing you need to do is obviously you need to get your key pair and private key for signing. Right? So you have to go to the developer console. You can access the API and then create a API access key. I'll walk you through that. And they're going to give you a private key. You can get the P12 or the encoded, basically encoded P8 file. Once you have that, you have to create the, they have some instructions, a certain format. You have to create the request. And then you sign the request with your private key. Right? And once you have the request, you send it over to the Google server, and Google server in turn will take that, validate that, and then give you an access token back. Right? So you send the sign request to Google, and they'll send you access token back. Now you can use the access token, which is similar to a cookie, and same thing is the OAuth access token. So you can use it in your API calls by adding the authorization header, DARA, and access token. Just quickly go through these few steps here, right? So how do you go about doing this? So the first place to go is actually go to the developer console. And also, if you want to follow these instructions where these are documented, I'll walk you through that. That's over here. So let me just bring up. So this page here, it's in the slide deck. Actually, they actually give you a quick overview. It's a good read here, and it just gives you, servers, because we are running on a server, so this is actually the perfect application for us, right? So, and we're not running on behalf of a user. So this page gives you what needs to be done. It says, okay, first create a service account, and I'll walk you through that too. And then once you have a service account, create your API keys. Once you have the API keys, it just describes ways to create the JSON web token. So here they have given the outline here. Create and sign the web token. You give it to Google servers. They can return back an access token. Then use the access token to call BigQuery API or Gmail or G Drive or any of those APIs you're going to be using. Creating the token itself, again, is documented. It's straightforward. So basically what they're saying is there's going to be a header. You use the base64 version of encoded version of the header. There's going to be a claim set. This is like a JSON object. You base64 encode that as well. Then you take both of these, right? You sign it with your certificate or with your key, and you base64 encode that as well. And then you send all three of these with the dot in the middle. That becomes your JWT request. Okay. So let me go back to a quick snippet here. So first thing is base64 encode this guy here, the header. In Google's case, this is fixed, and this is the algorithm, and this is the type. So this won't change. And so this is the base64 encoded version of it. So you can use this, or you can actually write code to take this and encode it for you. That's step one. According to the rules here, right? So step two is the clear claim set. The claim set actually has information. It has information about you, at least your service account. And in case of Google, it's an email address. This is a service account email address. It's going to be some number here at something and then gserviceaccount.com. So this is a email account that's assigned to you by Google. You have to provide your scopes. Scopes are permissions, right? So if you want to access like the BigQuery, you want to say, oh, I want to be able to access it. I want to be able to use it for read only. I want to be able to use it for bulk uploading. If you go to BigQuery reference documentation, they'll give you the scopes. So that kind of permissions. What kind of permissions do you want in order for you to do all these things? And then there's some expiry and then issued date, issued at and expires. These are like long time milliseconds. Right? So we take this and we base64 encode this one here. So then we have this guy and the base64 encoded version of that. So that's what we need to sign. We take that, we sign that content, and we actually then take the base64 URL encoded version of that, and then it becomes your the JSON web token request. And I'll actually show you an example actually. So I know this is going through a lot, but they have a good documentation here. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. So let me show you the simple connector I did to create the JSON web token request, sends it to Google, and it returns the access token. Once you have, like I said, once you have the access token, we can actually interact with other services. So I am going to bring this guy up. It's called an action to get a Google OAuth access token, and it has only one action in this case, right? The connector itself actually is going to ask you, whoever is going to be using the connection, is going to ask some things. Okay, what's your service email, right? You will have that. It's going to ask for your default permissions. I just put a sample here. You can leave this empty because depending on what product you're going to be interacting with, permissions will be different. So if you're interacting with Google BigQuery, you have a space-separated list of URLs like this. If you're interacting with, for example, calendar, that will be a different set. Then the path to my certificate file. Skip a step, so let me take a step back. And actually, I'll show you how to create a console. So first, what we want to do is go to this URL that's in the slide deck. I think, let me go back to the slide deck. Right over here. So you go to the developer console. So console developers google.com. Can you log in with your credentials? And you're going to come onto a place like this. Right? What you want to do is you want to go drop down here in the top. You'll see developer console, and you'll see all projects. If you don't have it, it will be empty. And you want to say create project. So you say create project, and it'll ask what's your project name, and I think there's some other additional options. Then it'll give you a project, and then the UI will automatically switch to that project. Okay. So in my case, I created a project called PJICRT, and that's the one I'm in right now. So if you have other projects, you'll probably have everything listed here. So the first thing we want to do is we actually want to create some creds. So I'll go to, on my left-hand side, I'll see APIs and auth. I'll go there, and I'll go to credentials. Okay. and it's going to do credentials. And then I'm going to say add credentials. Okay. This is a one-time thing. Once you do the credentials, you have to download and keep a copy because I don't think you can get another copy. You got to delete what you have and create a brand new one. So you do add credentials, and it's going to give you two options. You can get you want a service account, so I'm going to say account, and it's going to ask, do you want a JSON or a P12 format? And you pick one or both, and you then say create. I'm going to cancel that for now. So what it does is actually downloads a file, and that file is an example of this. So this is a JSON file, and like I said, if you look at it, it has your service account email and your key. Okay? And there's some additional things, say client ID and probably client secret if you're using a different workflow. If you did a P12, it's this one here that came down, which is password protected, and the password is, I think it's called not a secret. The password is called not a secret, and it's documented in Google's documentation, the default password. Okay. So next thing I want to do is, if I want to use an API, I have to go to the API section and enable the API. So I go to my API, and I'll go to, for example, calendar. No, I want to do BigQuery. So cloud stuff here, BigQuery, and I'm going to say, okay, let me enable the API. So usually you see an enable button, and then you can continue from there. Let me see if I have Drive. I haven't done this before. I say enable the API. So now that API is enabled for me to use. And here you can see your metrics, how much you've used, etc. So, or you can actually export the API right here. So you go to the API section, and it'll give you all the calls you want to do. About, for example, list all the apps. I can execute. So if you're doing development through the console, now, if I click this, it says, oh, you need to authorize yourself. Well, this one didn't actually, but usually you have to. In that case, you click on this button here. So if I click on this button here, it says, all right, so in order for you to use this, it's asking for this permission, right? So depending on what you want to do, they would document what kind of permissions you need, and you say yes or no. But remember, we're still in the Google Developer Console. I'm just showing you some tools around the items here. Okay, so let me go back to Service Connector, which is here, right? So we're going to follow the algorithm, which I'll bring up the cheat sheet here, right? So we're going to get this guy, base65 encoded, create a claim set, which is an email address. This is a variable, obviously. Some scopes, again, it's a variable. The timestamps, they're again variables. Take this JSON string, JSON object, base65 encoded, concat this guy, and then this guy here. So that's the one you need to sign. You sign it, and then you have 1, 2, 3. This is going to be a payload. Okay. So connection properties in my case is I want to make sure it runs on the agent. So I check that, and I have my service account email that I'm going to test with, but it's going to be actually a connection property. Default permissions, you can leave this blank, like I said, and the path to your certificate file. Let me go to the actions. In this case example, I have only one action. It says, are given a set of scopes and your certificate, it will give me access token. So go to my input. I have permissions. This is it's a space separated list of permissions. And remember, the permissions are these URLs, right? So permissions actually typically look like this. So in they're called scopes in OAuth. So it's going to look like this. It's, I want basic access to in this case BigQuery. I want to be able to insert data, and then something about dev storage, full control on the dev storage or something. I'm not really sure what this is, but it's an example. So it's a space separate list of URLs or URIs like that, so that we can ask this from the user who wants to be actually wanted to get access token, right? But as a default connector, if you would want to provide something, you can actually provide a default value as well. Again, it's optional, but you can provide a default value. So that's how this works, right? So it's binding. So here's what it is, right? What Google says is create the JSON Web Token request and send it to certain URL, and we'll return you the access token. So this is that URL we need to send it to. So let me first capture the scopes. So I want to see what scopes I want to be using. And it's just a little bit of query, nothing complicated. I'm saying if the default permissions and the permissions that came through the input parameters are there, then I want to use both. If only the permissions that came through the input parameters are available, use that. Otherwise, use the default permission. So you're just going to have both one or the other. So you have three combinations here. So this is going to end up with a string, and the string is a space separated list of URLs or URIs. I need the time in the algorithm. I have to get the current time. So because you want to know when the request is issued and how long you want to last it for it to last, right? So basically, again, I'm using these service connector functions. So fn colon now is the current time in milliseconds, and I'll divide that by 1,000. So I get my current time since 1970, right? But in seconds. Right? Then I want the same thing 1 hour later. So I'll take this guy here and add 1 hour in seconds to that. So I have two variables I need. When I say variables, let me just go to the advanced view quickly and just notice that I actually this UI is let me see if I can get it to going like this. Right. You notice I click temp. When I do that, it just tells me that when the outbound requests are going, not to send these guys up. They use them as temporary variables as a holding place. So I have my scopes. Let me just go back up. I have my current date, 1 hour from now. Here's my header, which is a fixed string, like I said. We just have to base64 encode it. And then we have a claim set. Claim set is this, right? So according to if I look at the documentation somewhere here, they'll say here's the claim set, something like this. This is fixed. Here's the claim set. Right, so let me go back to this one here. So here's my claim set, and claim set is JSON. So I had to double escape it. And I'm just saying issue that. Here's my service email, the scopes. This is for the auth mechanism is OAuth2. Then I'm saying it expires 1 hour from now, and it's issued now. Right. So this is still going to be evaluated as a string. I have that. So I am actually now at I did this, and it's base64 encoded had done these three. So I need to get the content to sign. That's these two. So message to sign is I'm going to take the header and the claim set, right? The base64 encoded value, the claim set together. That becomes my header, my message to sign, and it's actually there's a period in the middle. So that's the format, right? Now that I have that, I want to be able to sign it. And the interesting thing you want to see is this. I'm just saying if my key path is given, because that's the route I'm going to demo today, is I'm going to use this function saying sign it key file, the message I want to sign, the path to my key file, so it's in my C colon path. I'm using these are my additional parameters I use. Okay, and that's it. So then I'll end up with a base64 content there. And then finally, this is fixed. This is fixed. It's constant from Google specifications. You don't change anything. Now notice that all these are temporary other parameters except for these two, right? So that means when I'm doing a post, all these will not go out the wire. They'll be evaluated, but they won't go out the wire except for these two. So what you're going to see out the wire is you're going to see this guy going out the wire, and then define the assertion, which is your JWT request going out the wire, which is the message to sign, right? And your signed message. So that way Google can compare, oh, this is what they're about to send me, and this is what the signed version. We can see, oh, we can validate the signature. So let me go and hit test on this. But before you hit, so make sure you pick the right agent. Otherwise, you'll be testing on somebody's agent, and if this is working, I can hit test, and it's going to go out. Right, there you go. It came back with a outcome for me. Now I can take this access token and then use it in my connectors. So as you can see, the outbound request was this, right? So we said the everything that they actually grant type, and the assertion should be somewhere here. There you go. So this is what we actually created with these signatures. Okay. So we got the response back. If there's an error, you'll have some value here. Since we didn't get an error, we'll have a value for the access token. So that's the general one. So I'm actually using this for example, in order to use BigQuery, right? So what I did was I published this connection, and then I created a new connection. This is a new connection, and named it with my laptop name here. So because I'm going to say this is going to run on this laptop. So I know that whenever I run this connection to get access token, it's always going to come into my laptop and get it. And I gave my service account name, and I gave my path to the key file. That's on my laptop right now. I didn't provide this because depending on my use case, I want to provide this at runtime, so I didn't want any permissions in here. Basically, when we run this, we have to supply a permission at some point, and at the end of it, it's going to return us access token. One of the examples here use is BigQuery, and actually you find all the documentation here. And I'm thinking I'm doing a list, I think, of projects. So under the projects category, you can list available projects like that. So you can list all the projects. In this service connector, if I look at the BigQuery, all it's doing is some actions, list projects, and list jobs. The list projects actually has an input. It just want to know it has the access token. Let me go back to the base request. Here we go. So actually, it's based on an inheritance. So the base request says, I'm going to provide access token. I'm going to ask for access token. And in the binding, I'm going to go to the BigQuery API because this is their URL, base URL. And I'm going to provide authorization header, which is bearer, and this token here. Obviously, this token is supplied, and I actually get it by calling this guy here. And I'll show you a complete workflow. But other than that, using the BigQuery API is pretty straightforward. So let me get a quick sample token. I think I already have a token here. And just to verify that I can use it, let me make sure that it was for the permission. Okay, so let me go back to this guy and then provide an access token here. I got my numbers right, and then list projects is simply saying go to this URL, and the subpath is called projects. It's going to list the projects, and this is all inherited. And if I hit test, so it went, came back with my available projects. Okay. And in a similar way, there's one here that says get the jobs, and in order for me to use it, I still need the access token, and I just need the project IDs, which I pass in as a sample project ID. And if I hit test, it should list me all the jobs. So if I put it all together as a simple process here, that's the pattern for this is this. It's pretty straightforward. All I'm doing is first I'll actually call my service connector, which is the Google JWT on my laptop, and I'm actually passing in some permissions, and it's going to return me the access token. So if you can see, here's a separate list of scopes or permissions that I want to use. I want to use BigQuery here. So I'm passing all these, right? And in the end, it's going to respond back with the access token for me. Then I'm going to use that access token in my BigQuery APIs. Right? So all my APIs right now require an access token, so I pass it in. And the result of this simple demo is it returns me a list of BigQuery project items. And what I'm doing is I'm just getting the first project name here and returning it. So if I go back to this URL, I should get at least a project name. We don't need this. I'll click this guy. So I should get a project name back. Yeah. So it ran on the cloud, came to my laptop, so it can actually access my access key. Went to Google, exchanged the JWT to an access token, went back to the cloud, and started running the rest of the workflow, which was this part to get me, one of the items what I wanted, which was just the friendly name. So this ran on my laptop and on the cloud, and the rest of it. There's another one here. You could see that I'm just using the calendar here, just a list, I think, calendar entries. In the calendar one, similar. So all I'm doing is I'm saying, same pattern I'm using it, and saying request to get an access token, but in this case, my scopes are slightly different because it's a calendar-based tokens. Then I call list calendar. It's a simple, get request that returns a list of calendars, and then I'm going to get the first calendar's ID and return it to me. So, but let me actually get a new access token, because in this demo file, all right, so I'm going to get rid of this guy for now, so I can create an access token for the calendar. So I have two. I want read-only access and then authenticated access. All right, so we got access token here, and this is probably different because my permission was for calendars, right? So I'll get that value here, and I'll open calendar. All right, so open that guy up, and it just has a couple of things, but let me go back to the base so I can pass in sample data for that. And then I have list calendar, which is kind of straightforward. Basically, what I'm saying is go to this URL, and this URL / uses me calendar list. It will return a list of calendars for me. And then the authorization is obviously that came through this one here, which I added. One thing to remember is actually, let me just show this. So I should have, let me hit this guy test. And yeah, so it listed some calendars, actually listed one calendar that I have access to. Okay. Let me do the same thing. I have my calendar ID here, right? So I'll take that. And I have what's called list me the events in this calendar. And same thing, I'm just doing boilerplate stuff here, saying, okay, the calendar, the format is this. Calendar /v3 /calendar /calendar ID. And the ID can be like an email event, so I want to encode that for URI /events, right? So I'll do that, and if I hit test, I'll get a whole bunch of events, calendar events, right? So what I added yesterday was, so you'll see a whole bunch of events like this. Okay. Now, if you're using a service account, not a problem, just FYI. So let me go to my calendar. This is my calendar under my account, but you're running as a service account, right? So they're not the same thing, right? It's not your personal calendar. This is my personal calendar, and it's not going to appear in this API call. So if you make an API call, you may see empty list here. All you may see is like a summary and an e-tag and an empty items list, because if you're using a service account, there won't be any calendars because they don't have calendars. And initially, I was expecting to see my own calendar, and that's not the case. What I need to do is obviously what we do today is actually when you want to use a calendar with somebody else, you got to go to your settings somewhere here, and then you see share calendar somewhere here, calendars, share, right? You can say share calendar. So you got to share it. And when you want to share, you typically put an email address, and the email address is your service account email address. And once you do that, that calendar is shared, and therefore your service account can have access to calendar. So this is, let's go to list. I think the first calendar ID it found, this one here. So it's calendar demo. All it's doing is listing all the calendars and then getting the ID of the first one. So it's nothing fancy or nothing complicated. So it's going to go onto my laptop, create a JSON Web Token request, sign it using the certificate on my laptop, send it to Google, exchange that for the access token, and then on the cloud, use the calendar API from then onwards. So it's, yeah, so that's my calendar ID. I have only one calendar, so just came back with one.